Hello friends, this is Growl. Today I wanted to cover specific Mistweaver Monk gameplay in Mythic Plus for Shadowlands. If you're in the process of deciding what class you want to main, this video is designed to give you some insight as to what I think about the current state of Mistweaver and what dungeon healing will be like. I want to cover the basics in this video, along with some covenant and talent choices I think may be best, and at the end I'm going to give my best guess as to how I would rank it and answer some of the more common questions I get from my stream. I'll be sure to leave a table of contents for the video time if you're already familiar with the basics and want to skip ahead. Before I start, I just want to mention that I'll leave some links in the description for my UI and other weak auras, as well as information on the Mistweaver changes for you to check out if you're interested. Mistweaver's been flying under the radar over the course of the beta, and that's mainly because, well, it's been pretty buggy. Blizzard has attempted to fix a couple unique legendaries alongside talent reworks to try and reinvent the fist-weaving playstyle. However, it's taken them a bit of time, so it's pretty hard to test. The core of Mistweaver's healing revolves around Renewing Mist and Vivify. Renewing Mist is a mana-efficient and smart heal over time effect that travels across the party to heal other injured party members if its target reaches full health. Vivify is just the Mistweaver's straightforward heal, however with one bonus. It also heals all other targets with Renewing Mist. This means keeping your Mist maintained is a vital part of the healing rotation. Another important part of Mistweaver is their Mystic Touch debuff. Whenever you damage an enemy, it applies Mystic Touch, increasing physical damage done by all party members by 5%. Even if you don't have the time to deal much direct damage, just tagging everything that you're fighting is an important contribution that you can make. Mistweaver's strength rests in their powerful single target healing. While some other dungeon healers struggle trying to keep a single target alive who's taking heavy damage, Mistweaver can keep them healthy with ease. This mainly comes down to the spell Enveloping Mist, a heal over time effect that also increases the healing of all of your other abilities by a substantial amount. No ramp time required, just throw that Enveloping Mist on and you're juicing them with big heals. Monk's mobility is also excellent. It's much easier to get out of danger as a Mistweaver than other healers. You're equipped with 2 charges of Roll, Tiger's Lust if talented, and also Transcendence. I think Mistweaver has a fairly simple and straightforward healing rotation that works great for beginners. Keep your Rising Mists up. If someone needs a bit of healing, you can throw them a Vivify, and for heavy healing, use Enveloping first and then Vivify. That isn't to say there isn't a decent amount of depth to the class with different talents and legendary builds, though. A lot of the finesse with Mistweaver comes with your use of mob control. Leg Sweep, Ring of Peace, and Paralysis can all be used to great effect in Mythic Plus to speed up dungeons and also help keep your team alive. All in all, Mistweaver has a pretty effective toolkit that's not only fun to use, but beneficial for both top groups and pugs. To me, the biggest weakness of Mistweaver is healing on the move. All of Mistweaver's big healing comes from its casted abilities, so when your party is taking heavy damage, if you can't stop and plant to get a few spells off, it's easy to fall behind. This can especially feel cumbersome during affixes which also can interrupt your casting, like Quaking or Volcanic. This can be offset a bit with the talent Invoke Chi-Ji, which turns your melee attacks into healing. However, often when a lot of movement is required, it's less safe to be around mobs as well. Mistweaver has great ramping potential by getting out and extending many Renewing Mists and then throwing out an Essence Font. However, in order to receive benefit from this ramp, you do need to be hard casting some Vivifies after into people taking damage. Although Mistweaver has strong single target healing, it doesn't have an external damage reduction spell. You do have Life Cocoon, which is especially good for low to mid keys. Life Cocoon is just a straight absorb shield, so it's awesome for using when you see someone in danger or if they take large amounts of damage and you don't have time to top them. However, as you start to get into higher keys, Life Cocoon scales poorly as it isn't a % damage reduction, so it isn't nearly as useful for tank support as something like Blessing of Sacrifice or Ironbark. Mistweaver's damage is also among the lowest of the healers. This won't be too big of an issue for most groups, however, if you think of Mistweaver Monk in the sense of doing tons of damage that's converting to healing, that isn't quite the case. Mistweaver's damage scales sort of poorly into large pulls, especially considering the fact that Spitting Crane Kick is now capped to 6 targets. It isn't to say that you are doing no damage as a Mistweaver, however, it definitely felt a lot harder for me to meaningfully contribute compared to Resto Druid or Disc Priest. In Shadowlands, you choose to align with one covenant, which grants you access to 2 abilities as well as a passive soulbind tree. I've struggled quite a bit actually with covenants for Mistweaver. Nothing felt quite right. After some testing, I started liking Necrolord, although I'm not sure if it's working as intended. Bone Dust Brew reads, hurls a brew created from the bones of your enemies at the ground, coating all targets struck for 10 seconds. Your abilities have a 35% chance to affect the target a second time at 35% effectiveness as damage or healing. And Gust of Mist heals your target with Bone Dust Brew for an additional amount. However, it's actually performing a little bit differently from how it reads. Bone Dust Brew currently acts as a temporary renewing mist, allowing your Vivifies to cleave onto party members hit by it. This is an alright ability in Mythic Plus, and compared to the alternatives, is probably the best choice. I'm not sure if the tooltip is wrong, or the ability isn't working right, or what. Either way, a big problem with Mistweavers on beta right now is their extremely weak Covenant abilities. Druid Convoke, Disciplined Priest Boon, and Holy Paladin's Divine Toll all act as strong healing catch-ups when needed, at varying levels of strength depending on their cooldown. In the alpha builds, the Kyrian Mistweaver ability seemed well suited for this, but it was dramatically nerfed because of how strong it was in raid. Right now, there are two standout legendaries for Mistweavers in dungeons. Ancient Teachings of the Monastery converts your Tiger Palm, Blackout Kick, and Rising Sun Kick damage into a heal that goes into one nearby ally. This feels good to use in low damage moments where you don't need to heal much and you can focus mainly on DPS. It also helps encourage weaving in a bit more Rising Sun Kicks into your healing rotation. Although in practice, this legendary seems like it could be pretty strong, it was only contributing a little under 10% of my overall healing in a dungeon. Very often, I had to abandon the DPS for a healing mindset and just focus mainly on Renewing Mist and Vivify. I don't necessarily mind this, since I'm a healer after all. However, for more healing intensive dungeons, I ended up preferring Tear of the Morning. This legendary empowers your Renewing Mist, transferring even more healing on a slightly shorter duration. This was doing much more healing overall, close to 20% or more. However, it also lowered my damage a little bit. It's important to note that the Extend Life bonus doesn't get extended with the talent Rising Mist like Renewing Mist does, and also doesn't even have the normal pandemic effect that most HOTS have where they extend slightly longer if you refresh it as it's about to run out. I think legendary usage for Mistweavers and dungeons will likely be a mix of Teachings of the Monastery for some of the lower healing throughput dungeons, and Tear of the Morning when you need a bit of an extra boost. Here's the talent setup I've been using. It's pretty similar to what Mistweavers have been running in Mythic Plus for Battle for Azeroth. The only major talent change Mistweavers got was Invoke Chi. Although on paper this ability should be really strong for dungeons, in practice it's been bugged for almost the entire beta and basically unusable. Instead of healing you, it just heals itself, the crane, and now that it's reduced to healing only 2 people, you lose a huge portion of the healing from it. Jade Serpent statue has also been reduced and only channels for 7 seconds instead of its previous 30. This is a bit annoying as it takes a lot more micromanagement to get the same amount of throughput from it. You end up using Soothing to cast single Vivifies often just to get the statue retargeted. Although Mistweaver has been a bit buggy during the beta, I think it's going to come together to be a decent healer. Its slightly weaker group healing and low damage makes it a little bit less desirable for cutting edge keys, but an intuitive rotation alongside strong on-demand single target healing earned Mistweaver a 7 out of 10. I think with a few tuning changes, especially to the Covenant abilities, monk healers could compete with the best of them. I wish they could have gotten a bit more changes, even though Covenants, Soulbinds, Legendaries, and a rework to Chi should be enough to keep most monk fans busy. Before I wrap up the video, I want to talk about some of the questions I get asked most in my stream about Mistweaver that didn't get covered yet. First, we know how it performs, but how does Fistweaving feel relative to the Battle for Azeroth iteration of Mistweaver? So it's got some good and bad parts. I was surprised at how good Rising Mist felt, even with pretty low haste. I was worried I would have to go back to the talent Focus Thunder, but you can still extend HOTS quite easily. You aren't going to be doing much like Blackout Kick and Tiger Palm spamming in difficult packs. However, with a few well-placed Thunder Focus Ts and Rising Sun Kicks, you can get Renewing Mist up on your whole squad. It feels really good to start building up all your mists in a low damage phases, get a few resets on Sun Kick to extend it out, and then you have 5 on your party when you actually need to heal. I've also heard that they've made the healing a bit smarter from the legendary and from Invoke GG, which is a big help since you aren't neglecting the range players anymore. I haven't tested it myself though. The downside is that a lot of the pulls not only have pretty high incoming damage, but also are pretty dangerous to be in melee. I found it pretty hard to juggle everything, and often I found myself just sort of stepping out and abandoning the melee DPS altogether. On bosses, though, it did feel pretty fluid, but on trash packs, I didn't find myself in melee much. It definitely could just be the lack of experience or not having good weak auras or add-ons to know what's going on, though. How does the new Chi-Ji compare to the old Way of the Crane? The biggest differences are the cooldown and the mana cost. Way of the Crane had a much shorter cooldown but a very high mana cost, so you could get more uses out of it. However, if you weren't careful, you could easily run yourself out of mana. Chi-Ji is a bit more beginner friendly since it doesn't really have a big cost other than its cooldown. The healing that it does is comparable to before. If anything, Chi-Ji requires a little bit less scaling. You can still do decent healing on a low number of targets, whereas Way of the Crane, it felt like you wanted a big pull. Also, being able to throw out some instant cast Enveloping Mist was a really awesome change. That one was one of my favorites. It makes it easier to switch between DPS and healing since the duration is much longer now of Chi-Ji versus Crane. It still feels a bit clunky, however, I kind of also felt that Crane was clunky sometimes in BFA, and I probably ran it a little bit less often than most monks. That covers everything I wanted to talk about for Mistweaver Monk dungeon gameplay in Shadowlands. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you gave it a like and subscribe to my channel. I'll be covering tons of Shadowlands content from beginner all the way to the highest levels of Mythic Plus. Happy keying.